Hello everyone, my name is Shonda and welcome to my channel Under the Needle. So, Saturday was National Sew a Jelly Roll Day. So, I picked out my jelly roll, which was Dandy Annie by Robin Pickens for Moda. And I chose my pattern, and my pattern was two-step by Missouri Star Quilt Company. You can kind of see my quilt here. And so I had a plan, and I wanted to get my quilt sewn in a day. It did not work out that way. So the night before, I cut all my background, right? Because for the background, all I needed was 56 5-inch squares. So it was pretty easy to cut my yardage for my background. So I cut my background. And I also opened up my jelly roll and I paired up all my strip sets, because the way this pattern works is that you take your jelly roll and you pair up all your strip sets. Now, my strip set was very heavily gray, and it had some pink, some green, and some yellow. So I was like, okay, I think this pattern needed 2 extra strips. So I had found strips from my stash that would coordinate with the jelly roll strip. So, I opened everything, I ironed everything. And then when I went to start pairing them up, I was like, wait a minute. And then I went back and I counted, and 18 of the strips were some kind of gray. So I'm like, well, if 18 of my strips are some kind of gray, then it probably makes sense for me to pair a gray strip with a non-gray strip for my strip pairings. So instead of picking out some non-gray strips, like I think I had some yellows that I was going to pull in. So instead of pulling in the yellows, instead I pulled in gray. So I pulled in some gray strips that I had in my stash, and I decided to pair a non-gray strip up with a gray strip. And so I did that. And so I paired everything up, and I did all this the night before. So the next day I get up late. I slept in till like 9:30. So I get up, and then I'm slow and lazy. So I put it around the house for like an hour and a half. And then I was like, okay, let me get dressed. So I got dressed, and I had some errands to run. So I went and ran my errands, went to the grocery store, got back, put all the food up. And so then I start sewing. So at this point, I've already lost a lot of the day. It's like 2:30. So I start sewing at 2:30. So I sew my strip sets together. And then when I go to subcut them, I'm like, wait a minute. I need to have some order here, because I need to balance out the gray in the quilt. If I have gray in every single strip set, because the way this pattern works is you pair the strips up, and then you take some of the strips and you cut 9-inch segments, and then you take some of the strips and you cut 5-inch segments, and you cut the 5-inch strip set segments to your 5-inch square, and then you press that, and then you attach a 9-inch strip set segment to what you've already sewn, and everything matches up really nicely, and you get, I think, a 9-inch unfinished block, 8.5 inches finished. So I was like, okay, I might have trouble balancing the gray. So now I had to start making, design decisions. So I decided that for half of the blocks, I would sew a gray strip to the background. I would sew the gray side of the strip set to the background. And for the other half, I would sew the non-gray side of the strip set to the background. And what I mean is this. So you see here's a block. Oh. So here's my background square here. And so here I have a non-gray strip sewn to my background. And then here in my next block here, you can see that I have a gray strip sewn to my background, the gray side of the strip set to my background. So I said, okay, I'm going to do half and half. And then when I add the 9-inch piece, I'm going to flip it. So in those instances where I have the non-gray side of the strip set sewn to the background, when I sew in the 9-inch piece, I'm going to sew the 9-inch piece toward the background. And then here where I have the gray side of the strip set sewn to the background, I'm going to sew the non-gray side of the 9-inch strip set to my background. So, but I had to get there. So it took me a while to figure out how I was going to sew the strip sets together. And I messed up a lot. So there was a lot of unsewing. Okay. I had to get my seam ripper out quite a bit, because I would say, okay, so since I have gray here, then when I sew on the 9-inch piece, I need to make sure the non-gray is sewn to it. And I messed that up a lot and had to unsew it and re-sew it again. So it took me a lot longer to sew than what it should have taken because of the design decisions that I was trying to make, because I wanted to make sure that I balanced out the gray, because literally half the strip set was gray. So that's what I did. So I got everything sewn up. So on the day, on Saturday, I got all my blocks sewn, and I got everything up on the design wall as well. So I did make some progress. It took longer to sew than expected, but also I did get the blocks sewn and I got everything on the design wall. But again, everything took longer than was expected, because I started having to make design decisions to balance out all the gray. So I got everything up on the design wall, and then I looked at how Jenny laid out her pattern. So there are no pressing instructions. So if you do a lot of Missouri Star quilt patterns, a lot of times there aren't like really clear and specific pressing instructions. And so I looked, so when I pressed mine, I pressed all my strip sets. When I sewed them together in the pairs of 2, I pressed everything toward the gray. And then when I attached that 5-inch segment to my background, I pressed everything away from the background. So then when I attached that 9-inch segment, I also sewed that away from the background. So everything for me was sewn away from the background. So if you can see here, here's my background square, and you can see my seams are just pressed away from the background. So that's kind of how I did everything. And then when I went to lay everything out Jenny's way, this was Jenny's layout in the book. Oh shoot, hold on, sorry. Flopping all around. So if you look at Jenny's layout, it's so hard to show it. Here, just do this. If you look at Jenny's layout, you can kind of see how when you piece these blocks together, these seams intersect on every block. When you put the blocks together, so when you put this block with this block, there's some connecting seams, and I didn't want any seams to connect. So I did mine a little different. Oh, so right here, you can see it kind of clearly right here. So this is 2 different blocks. So this is the block from one row. This is the block from another row. And you can see that you have to match up these 2 seams here. They intersect. And I did not want that, because everything wasn't pressed properly, to where I was going to have to like repress some seams, and I didn't want that. So I chose a different layout to where none of the seams intersected. The only seams that I had to worry about was when I was piecing my rows together. And that was it. So this is what I came up with. This is my quilt. It's kind of hard to see the whole thing, but so I laid out my blocks like this. So if you can see, in this row, this block starts at the top left, and the block next to it is the bottom left. I can't even, no, bottom right. Everything is reversed for me. So this is at the top right, and then the next block is in the bottom right. And then the next block, the background is in the top right. And then the next block, the background is in the bottom right. And so that's kind of how I did mine. And then for the next row, what I did was I started on the bottom left. And so it made it so that my background is more spread out. So if you look at Jenny's, oh Lord, I lost the page. Hold on. Page 74. So if you look at Jenny's quilt, you can kind of see that the background kind of forms diagonal rows. So that's how her layout is. My layout doesn't make those diagonal rows. I kind of have two backgrounds that'll kind of kiss each other but not overlap. See, again, here we have two that kind of kiss each other but don't overlap here and here. And so I kind of like this layout better because it was less seams to match. And I kind of didn't want those diagonal rows of my background. And so I don't have any of that in the layout that I chose. So I did follow the pattern, but my layout is different. And so I went back, and one of the quilts that I was looking at doing was the Jelly Roll Twist by Fat Quarter Shop. And when I went back and looked at it, the Jelly Roll Twist by Fat Quarter Shop is almost the exact same pattern. Because you still make pairs. It's just, it has less blocks. So you still make pairs of, you pair off your strip sets, right? And then you cut 5-inch segments from some of them and 9-inch segments from the rest. And then you match them all together. So all of that is the same. But the weird thing is the pattern from Fat Quarter Shop laid out their blocks exactly how mine are. So the way that I chose to lay out my blocks just for ease of pressing and ease of matching seams, to avoid matching seams, happened to be the exact same way that the Fat Quarter Shop pattern Jelly Roll Twist did their layout. So they were actually the exact same pattern, but just a different layout. So the cutting instructions are the same. The piecing instructions are the same. The only real difference is the layout. So I really like how this came out. I'm super pleased with it. I was really worried about balancing all the gray. And when I look at this, I really can't even tell the strip sets that I brought in from my stash. Like, it all goes together really seamlessly, really well. And I have a lot of trouble with color matching, like color theory, like matching, trying to pick out coordinating colors. And so the grays that I ended up using, they're not part of the collection, but when I look at the overall quilt, it doesn't stand out to me. So the ones that I ended up using from my stash were this gray here. So this was from my stash. And the other one from my stash was, I can't even find it. This one. This one here came from my stash. And honestly, it all works pretty seamlessly. Like, I really can't tell the difference. I really can't tell that they came from my stash and that they weren't part of the Jelly Roll. So it does help me relax a little bit when matching colors. When you put it in the quilt, you really, it's very forgiving when you put these colors into your quilt. As long as it's somewhere in the family, it really doesn't stand out. So it came out really well. So like I said, the pattern is super easy. The sewing is really easy. I would recommend finding a jelly roll with balance. That would be my thing. So just finding a jelly roll that has a lot of different colors in it, because 18 of my 40 strips were in the gray family. And so that made my quilt construction a little bit more difficult, a little bit more complicated, because I had to consider balancing that gray. Because as I was sewing stuff together, I didn't want to, you know, have too much gray and like concentrated in one spot. So when I put my blocks together, so it's like the first block will have the non-gray strip sewn to the background. The second block is rotated, but then the gray strip, the block with a gray strip sewn to the background is next. And then for the next block, again, rotating it, the non-gray strip, the block with a non-gray strip sewn to the background was the next. And I kind of just went through like that. But I am really happy with how it came out. I love the way that it looks. I'm happy that I finally got to use this jelly roll. It's been a line that I do like, that I do enjoy a lot. So, but again, the pressing, I will say that's one of my quips. Sometimes with the Missouri Star patterns that I've done is that they don't have really clear pressing instructions. I think the only pressing instruction they had here was, well, no, I take it there were some pressing instructions. So they did say that for your strip sets to press to the dark, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, press to the dark. And it did say that when you put your blocks together, to sew half of them one way and half of them the other way so that things will nest. So there were some pressing instructions. I take that back. That was an unfair criticism because I didn't notice that. It didn't pertain to me because I laid out my blocks in a completely different way, and I couldn't do what they were doing because I had the whole gray issue that I had to balance. But it does say that after you sew the blocks, it says press the seam allowances. Oh, no, no, that's when sewing the rows together. Yeah, so the only pressing instruction here is when you're piecing, is when you press your strip sets, that you press them to the darker fabric. But when you attach those strip sets to your background, there are no pressing instructions for that. It just says that when you put your rows together, you want to put the odd numbers in one way and the even numbers in the opposite direction. Now, I don't know because I didn't do this exactly the way they said to do it. But I'm imagining you would have had some opposing strip sets because you would have had some seams that did not nest, because looking at this layout and with no pressing instructions, when you're putting these blocks together, I don't know that there's any way, there's no, okay, so what the pattern doesn't, at least in the diagram, what the pattern doesn't say is when you attach the 5-inch piece of the strip set to the background, it doesn't say attach the lighter side. And then once you attach it, how to press it. So if it said, okay, attach the lighter side of the strip set to your background and then press it toward the strip set, and then you flipped your blocks, maybe the seams would nest that way. I don't know if they would or if they wouldn't, but the instructions don't say to do that. So there's no instruction here about how to attach the segments of your strip set to your background or what direction they should be in, and then how to attach your 9-inch segment. So my feeling is that if you made this quilt and you just pressed however you want it to press and then attached your units the way you wanted to attach them, then you would have some mismatched seams that you would have to flip and repress. So to avoid that, that's why I chose this layout, because choosing this layout, every single thing is offset. So this block here, so here's 2 blocks, and you can see that when this block is sewn to this block, there's no matching seams, because you just have these two pieces here, these two pieces here. There's nothing to that meets each other. And then when you sew the next block, same, this is offset. So this here is offset from the other seam. So there was absolutely no matching seams. The only seams I had to match, again, was when I was putting the rows together. I had to match the seams from putting the rows together. So like right here. And that's normal. That's with any quilt. You're going to have to match those particular intersections. So this was an easy pattern. It made it easier with this layout because I didn't have to match any seams. I feel like if I had just, I feel like if I had had a more balanced strip set where I didn't have half my strip set being gray and I had done this, I feel like when I went to construct it, I might have had some seams that didn't nest. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I feel like I would. So, but it was an easy pattern. And this layout made it easier, but it was an easy, it was a very easy sew. It was a mindless sew, except for the fact that I had all of that gray and I felt the need to balance it. And the only way to balance it was to construct the blocks in a specific way so that I wouldn't have too much gray concentrated in one spot in the quilt. So I think it came out really balanced, but it did take a lot longer than I expected it to take. Now, generally I would have finished it the next day, right? So all my blocks were constructed. Everything was on my design wall. So the quilt would have been finished the next day. But my fiance, he doesn't get a lot of time off work. And so I didn't get to finish it. What happened? What was, I think Sunday I had some things to do. And so I didn't really get to do a lot of sewing on Sunday. And then on Monday, I ended up going out of town, and I thought I was going to be back the same day, but I ended up not getting back until the next day. And so the first day that I was home to like try to finish it up was Wednesday. That was yesterday. So I finished it up yesterday and I got my borders on, and I just kind of wanted to show you guys. So my National Sew a Jelly Roll Day project turned into National Sew a Jelly Roll in 4 days. Such is life. But I'm happy with this quilt, and I'm happy that I got this done. I don't know what I want to put on the back of it. I've got to look through my backings and see if I have anything appropriate that can go on the back of this. I don't know at this point if I have anything that's suitable or not. I mean, I probably do. I've got quite a few backings, but I'll have to go through my backing collection and see what I have that I can potentially put on the back of this quilt, because I do want to go ahead and get this basted and quilted. So if I have something that works, then I'll go ahead and do that. And if I don't, then it'll just get folded up and put on a shelf until whenever. But that's my review. This is the two-step pattern by Missouri Star Quilt Company. Super easy to cut, right? Super easy to cut. All you need is 5-inch squares. 5-inch squares. So you can get your yardage and cut it into 5-inch squares, or you can get you 2 charm packs because you need 56. So you can get 2 charm packs and you just have some left over, or you can get you a layer cake and have some left over, or you can just cut yardage, and that's what I chose to do. You do not have to pre-cut your strips. You just pair them up and sew them together. And then once you have your strip sets sewn together and pressed, then literally you take some of them and cut 5-inch segments, and you take the rest and you cut 9-inch segments, and then you piece the 5-inch segments to your background, press and then you piece the 9-inch segments to one side. So that's another thing. You have to make sure that you are consistent with the side. So whatever side you're pressing, whatever side you're putting them on, you have to be consistent with that. I messed that up a few times and had to unpick that. I mean, I'd probably say with the 9-inch segments, I'd probably say 15 to 20. I ended up having to unpluck and then resew, either because I sewed it onto the wrong side. I mean, that happened initially. Sewing it to the wrong side happened in the very beginning. And then I had like a couple of those and I had to pick it out. Then once I knew what side it had to be on, then I was kind of able to assembly line sew. But the piece that I messed up a lot was what I told you guys, how I just decided to, you know, if I had a gray, then when I sewed it, the 9-inch segment, I wanted a non-gray. I messed that up a lot. I just kept forgetting. And so a lot of seam ripping. Now I do use an automatic seam ripper. By automatic meaning, you know, you can go to Bed Bath & Beyond and for like $9.99 you can get this thing that's designed to like trim nose hair. Well, that little tool is awesome for taking your seams out, because you don't have to like take your seam ripper and pick. Now if I'm working with half square triangles and we're dealing with bias edges, then no, I'm not going to use that tool because you will destroy your fabric. But for large seams and for seams that are not on the bias, it works really, really, really well for that, like amazingly well. So I use that pretty much exclusively. If you don't know what tool I'm talking about, let me know in the comments and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. But it's like a little $10 little thing that has like a little blade on it, and you can use it to like trim your eyebrows or trim your chin hair or trim your nose or your ears hair, whatever you got. And so I have one of those and it lives in my sewing room, and that's what I use it for. So that's all for me today. This video is way longer than I thought it was going to be, way longer than I planned for it to be. But this is the 2-step quilt pattern by Missouri Star Quilt Company, which is also the exact same quilt pattern as the Jelly Roll Twist by Fat Quarter Shop, except the layout is different. So essentially I ended up doing the Jelly Roll Twist pattern by Fat Quarter Shop because my layout matches their layout. Well, that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great day, have a great evening, and I will see you next video.